Mr. Lewis, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We have been witness the chaos for the last few weeks.
Yep.
I can say in the last 10 weeks or so. Relatively, Egypt was quite well, and the country was going in the right direction. People have chosen the president they wanted, and it was the first time I've seen in my entire life in Egypt people going out and casting their voice and choose the president they want. But suddenly has been removed to the power. Now the president in prison.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And first of all, I just want to say, as the Secretary General of African Socialist International, we unite with the democratic aspirations of the people for Egypt. And we think what's happening in Egypt is of world significance. It's important, not just for the region, but for all oppressed people, for all oppressed nations, because they have shown that if the people are mobilized, they have power to change the country, and they have been able to remove Mubarak, and that was really an inspiration to all the people, all oppressed people. And but also, I think it's important for people who are struggling now in Egypt to draw the lessons from all the struggles that came before. We know, for example, there have been a massive mobilization of people in South Africa to vote. Against the apartheid and to get a new government, and people voted. And today, if you go to South Africa, things are worse than under apartheid, you know. But some people are benefited from that. So basically, what we're trying to say is that we have to define what democracy is. You know, democracy cannot just be removal of one dictator, removal of Mobutu, removal of Mubarak or Ben Ali. It can't be just that. Democracy must mean the people are in power. The people can't be in power if you don't talk about the question of the state, because you can't have democracy if the state is not the people's state. And one mistake that was made that people believe the Egyptian army is definitely a people's army. I can see why, because the resistance against the Israeli army would try and invade Egypt, you know, in 67 and 72, and also the Suez Canal conflict. So the army defended Egypt, defended the people. So there is that tradition. People remember army as the army, but that was during the time of anti-colonial struggle. But today, the struggle in Egypt, like in the rest of Africa, is the struggle not just against imperialism, which has not changed. United States. There is no doubt in our organization, the United States is the enemy number one for people in Egypt and throughout Africa and throughout the world. Syria, Bolivia, all these countries, the United States is the number one problem. So you can't have democracy if you don't come to terms with the question of where is the United States, you know, what you're going to do, because the United States is opposed to any freedom in Africa. The United States is opposed to that. And that's something we, you know, Egypt and everywhere else, we have to put that in our planning. You know, how do we get freedom? Which means, how do we get rid of imperialism led by United States of America? That's the question that has to be taken into account. And there are other issues like the question of the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt and the United States. The protesters, you know, the struggle for democracy, you know, what kind of alliance between the masses of Egypt and the settler state of Israel? I don't see any alliance there. So this has to be exposed, and any power that comes to Egypt must be against that alliance. And the other question is always, so basically, is who is going to be responsible for mobilizing the people to take power, so the power can be in the hands of the people? Because democracy must mean power in the hands of the people. Democracy must mean somebody is being oppressed. And if somebody's going to be oppressed, it has to be the military and the ruling class in Egypt that is allied to the United States, Britain, France, all these places. That kind of leadership has to be removed from power, basically. And that struggle, that's how we see basically one way the struggle can develop. So they call for the people to be in power. You know.
Thank you. Fatima, if we come back, people have been witness the birth of democracy in Egypt, and now it's gone. So does do the people of Egypt again expecting to get another democracy?
I would disagree with you on that point. Democracy isn't gone. What we're seeing now, the millions of people taking to the streets in Egypt, opposing this military coup, opposing the killings, the indiscriminate arrests, the torture that we're seeing, these millions of people, they're continuing the revolution. Democracy isn't dead in Egypt. But I think it's an important point that you bring up. The fact that if democracy fails in Egypt, then it fails everywhere else. Egypt has plays a key role as a geographical and historical country. It has a lot of importance in the region. And if democracy fails, then democracy will fail throughout the region. I think, speaking on your channel, and to the Somalian community, nobody knows tyranny, more than the Somalian community. They've suffered for it for years under civil war, etc. It may be the West, the military that loaded the gun in Egypt, but it was the West it may be the military that pulled the trigger, but it was the West that loaded the gun. And the West must take account of what's happening in Egypt. They cannot sit back and watch hundreds, thousands of people being killed, being arrested, being tortured, simply for demanding democracy. I speak as a British Egyptian. I'm proud to call myself a British Egyptian, but I'm absolutely ashamed of the stance taken by those who claim to represent British values of democracy, freedom and justice. We can't sit back as the world, as a community, as a world community. I speak first and foremost as a human being. We can't sit back and watch these people being killed, being arrested, being tortured. There is a solution, there is hope, and that solution, that hope lies within the pro-democracy movement. We must see an end to this military rule. We must see an end to the killings. We must see an end to these arrests.
Right. If the military, as far as we know, the elected leader has been removed the power, and that's why I'm asking you, if democracy is still in Egypt, you respond that. But the problem have now live in fear. I've seen the government now, they are stopping any media outlet, like Al Jazeera has been targeted and other outlet of media in Egypt. During the Morsi, the media had their own freedom of speech. What happens?
I think, again, you bring up an important point, but I think it's important also to point out that this has gone beyond any groups or certain figures. This is now about basic rights and democratic principles being hijacked, being usurped by this military junta. You mentioned the channels that have been shut down. This military junta does not respect democracy, it does not respect freedom, and it does not want justice or freedom or democracy to reign in Egypt. You're talking about the shutting down of channels. They're targeting anyone who opposes them. And I think this is important for your listeners and viewers to know that the media has propagated this idea of only those in the ground are Islamists, or the Muslim Brotherhood are the only ones protesting on the ground. This is completely false. We're seeing Egyptians from all backgrounds and all walks of life coming out to protest against this military junta, and every single person who speaks out against them is targeted. It's time that we take a stand against this. We cannot sit back. I think it's important for all communities all over the world to actually come together and unite against the fascism, the acts of this military junta, because if democracy wins in Egypt, if it triumphs in Egypt, it will triumph elsewhere, and it can be an example for Syria, for Libya, for Somalia, in the region.
Absolutely. We have heard all the Brotherhood leaders has been abducted, and now they're in prison, and they have been sentenced a long sentence, about lifetime prison, some of them. And what is the hope of the Brotherhood in Egypt now?
Well, the hope of the Brotherhood is the hope of the Egyptian people. Is that we keep our revolution alive, the 25th of January revolution, and we keep the principle of the principle of democracy, the principle of freedom and justice alive. What makes this revolution special is never been about a certain political party or a certain figures or certain political figures. It's for the Egyptian people. It belongs to the Egyptian people. What's happening now in Egypt is everyone in the street. We can see Islamists, we can see secularists, we can see liberal, we can see everyone in the street just protesting, refusing this military coup to be succeeded, wants back the democratical process, wants back the democratically elected constitution, the president and the parliament. It was never been about Muslim Brotherhood, and it's never been about a certain political party. we will keep on. It happened before, and the Muslim Brotherhood will always been in prison before and always sacrificing, and then we will keep on the fight.
Okay. There is another question. You want to add
I
something?
wanted to add something
Okay,
onto
okay.
that. What Abdullah was saying, that what we're seeing on the streets now, these huge numbers from all backgrounds, it's a revolution of the people, by the people, for the people.
Okay.
And it's not just a revolution in Egypt. We're seeing globally protests taking place all over the world. Even in Somalia there were protests. And this Sunday actually in London we're going to hold a protest from 2 till 5 outside 10 Downing Street. And we urge all communities, all our brothers and sisters who support this cause. It's a simple cause. It's for democracy, it's for freedom and justice. Everyone who supports that cause to come down 10 Downing Street 2 till 5 this Sunday.
Mr. Louise, we have seen many places in Africa. I mean, change has happened, like Libya and Tunisia, but maybe people removed the regimes, but the problem still stands. People are suffering, a lot of divisions and vacuum of power. And how African themselves, in Europe you see there are 28 countries, they live peace side by side, and they respect one another. But in Africa, there's always a power struggle. People are fighting each other, even their brothers are Muslims or they're the Christians. We see they divided deeply and destroying themselves. As we see Libya now is worse than the regime now. So is Egypt escaped from civil war, the situation we see now?
It depends on the forces on the ground to have the correct leadership and the correct strategy to deal with it. It's no easy struggle, but one thing is that the world is changing, and the imperialist powers are afraid because they did not anticipate that the masses in Egypt will rise up, and the masses in Tunisia will rise up, and the balance of power is shifting away from them, because losing Mubarak, losing Ben Ali, that means imperialism doesn't have reliable puppets, to impose the policies, and that is a major factor. And as you can see, one time the U.S. was not sure if they're going to work with the Muslim Brotherhood, and then they're not sure, and then they moved to work with Abdul al-Sisi. So there is an uncertainty because they are insecure, which is good for all oppressed people. And plus what's going on in Iran, what's going in Syria, what's going in Venezuela. And basically what I'm trying to say is that there is a shift of in the balance of power in the world. And you have the rise of China. All this is making the United States, the British, the France incapable to see the future for themselves. So we should not be looking at them, because usually you hear in Africa saying we want the international community to do this and that. Who is the international community? And there is no way France and Britain or the United States is going to be on the side of oppressed people, oppressed nations, like all the countries in Africa, other places. They can't be on the side of the oppressed people. So what we're trying to say is that the power is in the hands of the people, but the people have to be organized for revolution. The revolution has to be clearly defined. Revolution must mean that the state, like it's in Egypt, that state belongs to the Egyptian petty bourgeoisie. Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, Mubarak, all these guys, they represent the petty bourgeoisie in that country. They don't represent the ordinary people in Egypt, who are the majority. They are in minority. That's why they can't rule peacefully. They only can rule through violence, intimidation, because they know they are a minority. And also the economy in Africa, generally speaking, is not the economy that's been created for the development of Africa. The economy in Africa exists for the sole purpose, or primarily to benefit Europe, to feed North America, Japan, and now also China. That's what the economy exists. So Africa needs its own economy, and which means that the revolutionary in Egypt has to begin to raise the question of an African economy. So they need to consider the revolution in Egypt in the context of African revolution. You have to make a call, say we want all the people in Africa to join us, because who is going to join the revolution in Egypt? all these, suffering people throughout Africa, all the mass of people in the Middle East, all the mass of people in America. There's a black population in America who has been the most consistent revolutionary force. They have to make a call to them, because that's why they put Obama in power, to have the face of the slave, so he can say salam alaikum, but he's not for the people. He's there to oppress the people. So they have to begin to address that. People in America, people in South America, all the oppressed have to join at the revolution. So that's fundamental, so that the people, they can have real allies around the world who will be in unity with them. But I really want to emphasize on this question. The question of democracy is a question of a new state. The state that's in Egypt is a bourgeois state. It's a state that is not there to serve the people. It's there to contain the people. It's there to maintain the status quo. That's why it's there. So that state that has to go. And democracy must target that, which means political education must take side, even inside the army. Poor soldiers, most of them are coming from the people. They have to stop killing their own people. They have to turn their guns against the enemy of the people, the RCC, all these guys. That's what the guns should be used for, not against the people. And all these are really important. So revolution for the people against the oppressors, from within and from outside. Absolutely. That's really important.
Absolutely. Father, I'm coming back to you. Arab League is Muslim organizations. I think it was built after 1970s. And now they're condemning about Assad in Syria, but they're not condemning about what's happening, the bloodshed in Egypt. What can you say there?
Well, their stance can be described as nothing less than shameful. It's double standards what we're seeing. Call out those that Assad has served his reign, and they don't find any interest. There's no interest for them to support Assad anymore. And it's a double standards. They have interests in Egypt, and they will support that. I mean, the African Union took a very, honourable stance, and it said to Egypt, this is a military coup. Recognize this as a military coup, and Egypt was removed from the African Union. The Arab League has not taken a similar stance. It's supported this coup. It has failed to actually even recognize it as a coup. And this support that we're seeing by tyrants, against the democracy in Egypt, again, we can't sit back and watch this happen. It's the same dirty tactics being used over and over again. During Mubarak's era, they supported his tyranny, they supported his oppression. They're doing the same thing with Egypt now. What we're seeing now is a military junta running the country like headless chickens. The economy is failing, tourism is at an all-time low. We're seeing arbitrary arrests. The human rights situation is absolutely terrible. We've got international organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch that are condemning these acts, and even the Arabs themselves are failing to condemn it. It's a simple basis, divided we fall, and united we can conquer. And we have to unite our efforts. We have to unite our forces. We must be one. Our aim is one, our cause is one. We are fighting against tyranny, we are fighting against oppression. I think if you look beyond all political differences, in Egypt, in any country, at the end of the day, we're human beings. Everyone wants to feed their child, everyone wants good education for their family, everyone wants to live in a peaceful, safe world. And unfortunately, that can't happen with this military coup that we're seeing in Egypt now. And so if we're looking for a solution, and there is hope, there is a solution, then we must see an end to this military rule.
Absolutely. Tell us about the rule of Morsi. And he has been in the office over 1 year. And the media had a freedom to reach wherever they want. I think there's less violence. But the economy was bad, as many people are complaining about it. So tell us about what Mubarak has done so far since he took the power in Egypt.
Well, the economy when in the Mubarak regime was getting low at all levels. The tourism levels, the currency itself, the Egyptian pound was going down as a rate. When Morsi took over, there was 2 years before Morsi under the military rule and the SCAF. It was very bad even for the economic. What Morsi he tried to get all the things together in the right way, and people were working in this way. We can see now, after the military coup, what happened to Egypt. Just in this 2 months after the 30th of June, we have 562 factories were shut down
500.
in Egypt. The Central Bank of Egypt borrowed more than 200 billion Egyptian pound from other banks just to survive for the government. We have the annual interest for the public sector has been dropped down from 50% to 10%. So we are speaking about a disaster in our economy. Not even the economy. I mean, if you look to the human rights thing, I just want to all our brothers to see this signal, the Rabaa signal. This Rabaa signal in the color of white and the color of yellow and black. It represents the day of a war, a crime against humanity. It represents a day of a Rabaa massacre. There are more than 3,000 people were killed this day, and more than 15,000 injured. This day will never be forgot by the Egyptian people, and all of the world will never forget this day. What happened in Rabaa, it represents the real face of this military junta, the real face of the military coup, that they are doing everything to survive. They are pushing the country into a dark tunnel, into a state of oppression and a state of terrorism and a state of fear, and they want to get back, and they want the deep state with the Mubarak regime wants to get back. And now we can see the release of the Mubarak like 3 weeks ago, which it's just keeping on. Like we are getting back, Egypt is getting back more than 60 years under this military rule. We are not going to let this happen, and I'm speaking here as an Egyptian first, not as a Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood is a part of the Egyptian people, and we continue on protesting, peacefully protesting, keeping on the Mandela way, the Gandhi way. They succeeded in their revolution, and they succeeded to reach their dream by peacefully protesting. We are not going to do anything. This is our country, and we will save our country from this military junta.
MashaAllah. Fatima, if I come back to you, do you think what we have seen and what we have witnessed for the last few weeks, we have seen deep divisions among sometimes the protesters? Some of them are with the the coup government, and other parties, Islamic and what they call the Brotherhood. So the people themselves, you see sometimes they're divided. Do you think there's a war looming now between the Egyptians, or this is the creation of fear?
I would have to disagree with you on that point. No Egyptian supports the killing of innocent men, women, children. No Egyptian supports arbitrary arrests. No Egyptian supports the torture that we're seeing of these prisoners. No human would support that. This idea of there's a civil war in Egypt, or there's division in Egypt, unfortunately that's another media tactic that they're trying to propagate. Again, it's the same dirty tactics. Make it look like the people are divided so that they can conquer. We're here to tell them we are united, our cause is one. Nobody wants to see their fellow brothers and sisters being killed every single day. No one wants these arbitrary arrests. We will not be silenced.
But that's happening. That's what I'm saying, because the security forces, they're doing anything. And there are some brothers I have seen myself holding their clubs and hitting their brothers in front of the camera.
What we're talking about is a police state that has been...
They had a ordinary uniform, the blunt...
In plain clothes, yes.
Clothes,
security forces in plain clothes. And Abdullah mentioned the Rabaa, and it was actually a massacre that took place. We saw the slaughter of innocent men, women and children, and their only crime was to come out and call for democracy. The security state that we're seeing now is deeply worrying, but it's not something new. It's something that we Egyptians are used to. It was used under Mubarak, but this time it's come back with a vengeance. They can't accept that people want democracy. They can't accept that people want peace and freedom and justice, because that simply won't serve their interests. We want a life that respects dignity, respects human life, and that's not what the military junta is giving us. General Abdel Fattah Sisi, he came out and promised a new roadmap. Fortunately, this roadmap is going to nowhere. It's leading us down a dark tunnel, and we as Egyptians, we won't accept that. We don't want to be ruled under this oppressive regime. We don't want to be ruled under tyranny. We want to be free. We want to dictate how our lives will be run, and we want freedom, democracy and justice. this idea of division again. Egypt is not Syria or Pakistan or Somalia or Algeria. Egypt is Egypt, and history will be made on the streets of Egypt, and that's what we're seeing now. Millions of people coming out in the street to protest this military junta that is committing crimes against humanity, against the Egyptian people every single day.
Yeah, as far as we know, the military are using bullets and tactics and dividing people. So how are you going to change when these guys are in power? You know, as you mentioned, you know, Mubarak has used these tactics for the last 30 years. But the problem is, how are you going to remove, you know, the elected leader has been removed from power and now is in custody and nobody knows, in a secret place. And all the leaders from Brotherhood, now they're in custody or they're in prison. So how are you going to get that gain to get that power?
I'll tell you something. On the 2011, in 2011, when we had our revolution, we stood together as Egyptians in Tahrir and all over Egypt to demand one thing: an end to the corruption and, you know, tyranny of Mubarak's rule. Nobody asked us how long it would take for us to get democracy. We stood together because there was hope, and our message and our cause was one. And we're seeing the same thing today. Nobody asked Mandela in South Africa how long it would take for the apartheid to fall. It will take as long, we will stay as long as it takes, because this life that we're living now is not a life. We're seeing people being killed, people being arrested. Nobody wants to live like this. We will stay in the squares, we will protest peacefully. We'll use all peaceful means possible to bring an end to this military rule, because we want to live. We want to live in dignity, we want to live in harmony, we want to live in peace.
Absolutely. Brother Abdullah, what do you think about the military coup took place in Egypt, and now the Egyptians, a lot of, like Fatima, has a hope, and but there is a bleak in Egypt now. The people are fighting each other as far as we know. Not the ordinary citizens, but the army side, they crack down all the Brotherhood, or those who demanding for justice. And so how are you going to change that power into the clean politics?
Yes. We agree that there is a political difference in Egypt and there is a political polarization. How do you solve this kind of problem? As any country in the world, you do a democratic process. You do elections. You do ballot box. And that's how we solve our problems, and how we sustain a balanced country, not a divided country. What the military did, they chose one side on another side. They choose the side destroyed the idea of the ballot box, destroyed the idea of the democratic process. That's why we can't accept that, because this is the worst choice that will ever Egypt will go for. So yes, we will continue on peaceful protesting, and yes, this is the best choice that we have, even if it's the hardest way. Yes, it's the hardest way to counter the bullet with a peaceful protesting. Yes, it is the hardest way, but it will give us the best result, and it is a balanced country, because we believe that bullets will never produce justice after that, and will never produce a state that people will live peacefully with each other. That's why we need to do peaceful protesting. We need to achieve our Egyptian dream that we first dreamt after the fall of Mubarak regime. So we will continue on peaceful protesting. It's not about Muslim Brotherhood. It's about all the free Egyptian people who want dignity and who believe in the principles of freedom and justice.
Thank you. Louise, Europeans, they have a European Union, and African, they have their own African Union. Why the African Union shouldn't interfere, the bloodshed in Egypt?
Yeah, it's a very important question, because we in African Social International, under the leadership of Chairman O'Malley, I think, if you read his writing, it's correct when he says there will be no, Somali liberation, no Egyptian liberation, there will be no South African liberation. He says there will be liberation for all African people. And it makes absolutely sense, because when you see what's going on in Egypt, you see France has an interest, United States has an interest, Britain has an interest, China has an interest, all these countries have an interest. So Africa also has an interest because we are in Africa, which means that freedom will come not as a separate entities, but it comes for all of us, which means that we need a strategy, we need an African plan, because United States has an African plan. When they bribe the Egyptian army with $1.5 billion every year, and they train the army officers in the United States, they don't train them to work for democracy in Egypt. They train them so they can serve the interests of the United States. They have brought Africa in Africa, not to look after Africa, to make sure they control the resources of Africa. That's sort of Africa throughout Africa. So there is no way we can be free in Egypt or anywhere else if there is no African plan. You can't go around it. It's impossible. And the AU is not the African plan. The AU is basically an association of African leaders to pretend that they're going to unite, but they never unite. They've got no African plan to begin with. They don't. If the African leaders were real leaders, first there will be no foreign military bases in Africa, and the U.S. will not have the 1.5 billion treaty with Egypt, and all these treaties they have with Algeria, with Nigeria, all these countries, they will not exist. We will have an African economy, and we will build Africa. Africa will be industrialized because Africa has all the resources you need to have a modern life, a good life like young people all over Africa want to have. But we can't have it because Africa is not free. And that's have to be the starting point, which means the struggle in Egypt is struggle for the liberation of Africa. The struggle for democracy is a struggle for the liberation of Africa. And then you go looking into Egypt, you see who is for a real, genuine revolution and who is just for cosmetics changes, reforms without going to the bottom of the problem, basically. And that is fundamental. I think Egypt, they have reached that point where we can't just say things in general, that we are united. We have to be united against something, and something that is definitely a problem for us. And we keep saying the United States is a problem because it's an imperialist power, and they are the one who have an alliance with the military, and they're the one who are opposed to any liberation, any real freedom. So the revolution in Egypt has to recognize the United States as a problem.
Can I add to what
that's an important
Louise
point.
is saying?
Yeah.
That it's absolutely sad and even shameful to see countries who preach about democracy, yet they're happy to see democracy and its supporters being slaughtered in Egypt every day. We have to stop looking to these countries for change. We have to initiate the change ourselves. Having said that, if you're going to preach about democracy, if you're going to say that you support these values, then you must do something as simple as recognizing that what's happening in Egypt is a coup. You can't talk about supporting democracy and reforms while you fund 1.5 billion to murderers and tyrants in Egypt. That aid must be stopped. In reference to the US aid, that aid must be stopped. Countries must recognize that this is a coup, and they must stop supporting the killing of democracy and its supporters. You can't preach about democracy and then go and completely do something else. It's sad to see this situation, but there is hope again, and there is hope with the pro-democracy movement, and that's what we've got to look to for a solution.
Yeah. Can I just say this? It's an important point in the sense that the people in Egypt have to be definitely clear who are opposed to real self-determination in Egypt, and they have to be identified as such. That's what we're trying to say. Our contribution basically is that the governments of Europe, North America, Japan, everybody who is for what we call parasitic capitalism doesn't want to really change, because Egypt, like the rest of Africa and other places around the world, in South America and the Middle East, places like that, people are locked in what we call parasitic capitalism, which means that the world must be split between oppressor nations and oppressed nations. So they don't want people who are inside the oppressed nations to break that relationship we have with the oppressor nations. They don't want that to happen. What's happening in Egypt is an attempt to break away from that. Although the movement itself is not aware of it. So that's what we're trying to say. You want the movement to be aware of it. We're trying to break away from being an oppressed nation. We don't want to have an oppressed nation sitting on our ass so that we feed the oppressed nation, because that's the job of Africa, is to feed Europe, feed Japan, feed North America, and now increasingly feed China too. That's not our job. That's the job they've given us, and we want to break away from that. That's why we're saying the revolution in Africa is different. We can't just have the right to vote, because the right to vote in South Africa hasn't given nothing to the people. That's what we need to realize. You saw the shooting in Marikana. They shot miners like dogs. You saw that. That's the state. That's the state we're talking about. That's the same state Assisi runs in Egypt, and the ANC runs in South Africa. It's the same state. So we don't want that. The AU runs that kind of state. And we don't want the AU. We want a new unity, but the unity has to come from below. That's why we say we are for the workers and the poor peasants and all honest intellectuals, people like that, progressive mind, have to be with the workers and build a new Africa. And that will change also the whole world, because Africa is a cornerstone of the world economy. You remove it, the economy will sink to the sea. And we want Egypt, they're playing a key role. And that's why we're looking at Egypt, and we want to open up this dialogue so we can build that organization, revolutionary organization, that from South Africa to North Africa, from Cape Town to Cairo, same revolutionary movement. Get the parasite out of Africa.
Sorry to interrupt you. We get one caller. Brother, welcome to the program. What is your comment? Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, my comment is I'm really sorry about what's happening in Egypt at the moment.
Right.
But the thing, we have to go back into history and read about the war on democracy. The war on democracy. What had happened in Latin America, what had happened in Iraq, Libya. There's a international a plan that has, created by the American government. They created something called Euro Command, African Command, Asian Command, which is a modern colonial program designed by this kind of, Zionist, getting support from those governments. So what I believe is what is happening in Egypt, it's kind of regime change and part of the war on democracy.
So, as an African and the Muslim world, we always blame to other nationalities. But when it comes in terms of ourselves, for example, if I take Somalians, are Muslim, are Sunnis, they speak one language, and the neighbors are fighting each other, the brotherhood are fighting. This is a disease that the Africans themselves they have. So how are we going to change? Before we blame, those who rule in Africa, they're not Europeans. They don't have the European. There's no Michael. There's no anybody else. Sisi is one of the Egyptian leaders. So he's destroying and killing his people. And we can't, condemn to only United States or Europeans. The mistake is taking place as an African, as an Arab Muslims.
Yeah, but the thing is, money has no names. It is just money. And, if you are a company who wants to have employee, your employee will accept and follow your rules and regulations. Those who print, their own papers, their own money, are the rulers of this world today. And who have money, they will have employees. No matter where they are, in the military, in the government, in the members of the parliament. So we are in an occupied world. We need a change. It's we don't need just change and condemnation of America and Western world and things. We need to have an equal United Nations. The problem is the United Nations, because the United Nations of today is not equal United Nations. It's United Nations of United States. It's not United Nations of United Nations. We need United Nations of United. We need United Nations of United Nations because of, look, we got something called a superpowers. We got something called a United Nations Security Council. Who is Security Council? Why every nation regardless of how big or small they are, why we can't have equal rights. So, for example, we have a different religions, we have a different colors, we have different views. For example, when Saudi Arabia implemented Sharia law, and when they, are ordered to cut a hand or to kill someone following the Islamic Sharia law, the United Nations and the International Human Rights Organization will condemn. And the problem is because the Muslims are not asking, this is our way of life. You have to respect our way of life, and in order for us to respect your way of life. So the problem is, all these things are coming from United Nations, because if we have equal rights in the United Nations, where no nation can attack other nation, where no nation can interfere or invade another nation, then we could have a peaceful place. That is why, look, today for around 10-15 years, the jihadist groups are calling Islamic Brotherhood to join the jihad. And then they said, no, we are a democratic society. We want to implement a peaceful, process to follow peaceful process, to follow the democratic process. We will, follow our own way. Then what happened is now, they overthrow the democratic elected president of Egypt. This means they radicalizing the ordinary people, because they arrested their locally democratic elected members, their locally elected democratic president. So this is war on democracy. There's no democracy in the eastern part of the world, but there is a democracy in western part of the world. So the problem is, number one, we need to change the United Nations in order the United Nations to become or to be United Nations of United Nations.
Okay.
That's number one.
Okay.
Number two, we need to change the rules and regulations of the humanitarian organizations or human rights organizations in order for them to accept the way of lives of the people of this world. Because the Muslims, there is no single rule or regulation or rights that represents the Islamic law or Sharia law. So the problem is, number one, to change the United Nations rules and regulations, to remove United Nations Security Council, to change the way we use the international money. We need to have a gold money in order every nation to have to secure its assets.
Okay.
Because look, American papers are recognized as international money, and they can spend or they can use whatever they want. But if you print your own money, it's useless. So we need to be equal. That is what is missing from the world today.
Okay. Thank you very much for your participation. What can you add? He's saying all these problems are behind for the big powers. They pick up and choose whoever they want to install and put the power, and that's it. They don't regard what's happening in Egypt or other parts of the world. Is that correct?
Again, it's the idea of, if you're going to say you support democracy everywhere. Condemnations, regrets, they don't do anything whilst people are being killed and imprisoned. You have to take an active stance against this. This includes cutting aid to tyrants, to murderers. This includes calling for them to be tried in the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, because that's what General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is committing, crimes against humanity, and to actually support democracy. If you're going to preach about democracy, you actually have to support democracy. Actions speak louder than words, and that's what we need now, actions. Condemnations, they do nothing. We have to support democracy in Egypt. We have to support the people on the streets who are sacrificing their lives so that democracy can live. We have to support them, we have to support their cause. Again, our cause is one, our struggle is one. We need true democracy, and that can only be brought about if the international community wakes up to what's happening in the world.
But as you said, the international community has ignored. Thousands has been killed for the last few weeks. We know that. And what kind of international community that Egyptians now are waiting for? Because they see nobody has spoken, but we see Britain Parliament have spoken, and the Syria problem, and American, they are now doing, they're preparing for the war against the Assad. But nothing. Nobody talks about. Nobody talks about the destruction, the killing.
Exactly. It's these cosmetic diplomatic maneuvers, these lovely names and these lovely speeches. Well, these lovely speeches and lovely names and lovely ideas don't do anything while people are being killed. You have to take an action. You have to take a stance against this. Practice what you preach. We're seeing people who are dying now every single day. They are the actual ones supporting democracy, and that's what the international community has to support.
Can I just say that it's really important for all of us to realize that democracy is not an abstract concept. It doesn't exist for everybody in general. That's really, really important in the sense that countries who call themselves democracies, the countries we call imperialist countries, they are opposed. They are fundamentally opposed to freedom of the oppressed countries. If you look at the U.S. history, historically, it's a country that was built at the expense of indigenous of Americas. They exterminated them. So there is no democracy there for the indigenous of Americas, for they exterminated them. And the few who have remained, they live in concentration camps in the United States. What kind of democracy is that? Now, the African population in the U.S. has been an oppressed population from day one. We are not immigrants in the United States. We were in as captives. And today, if you go in the U.S., you will see the prisons, the jails of the U.S. are full of indigenous called Mexicans, who are just indigenous, who speak Spanish, and the Africans. Over 2 million. In fact, the United States has more prisoners in their jails than in China, for example. So democracy doesn't exist for everybody in general. Remember, in Africa, the Belgian and the United States assassinated Lumumba because he fought for democracy. Steve Biko was killed because he fought for democracy. The British went to war in Kenya because the Kenya in the 50s, they said, we want to be free. And the British went to war. You can't be free. And remember Algeria. In Algeria, we say we want to be free. The French went to war against people in Algeria. They said, you can't be free. So people have to be clear. Imperialism is opposed to freedom. Look at Bahrain. They don't talk about it because if people in Bahrain become free, that will upset the interests of the United States because they have the Fifth Fleet there. So they are opposed to democracy in Bahrain. Things like that. So we have to be clear. What's democracy then? We're saying people have to realize that we oppressed nations. We have to end our relationship with oppressor nations. That is the starting point. That's what Venezuela leader Chavez understood. That he doesn't want Venezuela to be a colony of the United States, anybody else. He said the resource of Venezuela belongs to Venezuela. So things like that.
Thank you very much.
That's really important.
We're very close to the end of the show. So what is your last comment to your nation? What you're going to send a message to the young Egyptians who are working with these crooks? I can say that new coup government, how we need to, as an African nation, we need to build ourselves and work together. We need to support to the people of Egypt to work together and see their brothers. Nobody's gonna help unless they help themselves. That is the message we want to send. What is the last message to your fellow Egyptians tonight?
My message to my fellow Egyptians: never forget your dream. Never let your dream go. Keep on peaceful protesting. Keep on asking for your rights. Remove this military coup from Egypt. Bring back our Egypt that we fought for it in the 25th of January revolution against Mubarak regime. My message to my African brothers: support us. Support the cause of democracy. Unite with us. We will remove this coup. And we will get our democracy back, we will get Egypt back, and then we can unite with each other and get Africa back.
What's the last message? We've got a few seconds.
Again, democracy will triumph. Justice always triumphs. We always look at history. It's the same winners and the same losers. And if democracy wins in Egypt, if justice triumphs in Egypt, it will triumph everywhere else. We urge our brothers and sisters to support us in this fight, in this cause for freedom, democracy and justice, and these principles will triumph.
You mentioned you have a demonstration on this Sunday?
Yes, so from 2 till 5 outside 10 Downing Street. This Sunday there's a protest to support democracy in Egypt. We urge everyone from all communities, all those watching us, to come and participate with us in this protest.
Thank you, Fatima.
Thank
you, Brother Abdullah, and thank you, Brother Louise. Thank you for coming tonight. We're all African. We're all suffering. I come from a suffering nation who have been suffering almost 22 years. So I want to say, my fellow brothers of Egypt, don't fight each other. Stick together. Think about brotherhood. Think about Somalia. Look Somalia today where it is. We don't want you become like where we are today, and Somalia is getting better. We're working hard every day to unite and become one nation, as you are always, and a strong nation. My fellow brothers and sisters who are watching tonight, this is the end of the program, but we need, like this program, to talk about our differences. We need to talk about how we're going to change Africa. Suffering almost essential. We are more than 1 billion people, combined Europeans, which is 28 countries, and America, who has more than 800,000 and population. We're more than that. We have all resources in Africa, but still Africa are divided and lingering by poverty. We need to fight the poverty and lack of education. We need to unite ourselves. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again. Thank you very much. Thank you for your coming.
Thank you for having us.